Bittersweet Symphony was the subject of one of the most absurd copyright cases ever. The time these two things were found legally to be the same is the story of how this man got mixed up in this song written by these two for this band via an orchestral version by him for a track on this album by this man, which was later sampled by him as the basis of a song by them, tarted up by him to become this, leading to them being sued by him and him, so that all composer royalties went to these two who didn't write it and all performer royalties to him who didn't play on it. And that's not all. Of many recent eras regarded with undue fondness now we no longer have to live in them, the 90s get off especially easy. We pretend it was all fuse bars and heroin, but really you'd listen to it rain and watch Mr. Blobby while peeling endless potatoes. Everyone coped in their own ways. I used to put others first, selflessly letting other kids have fun beating me up, while these lads numbed the tedium by being the Verve. They had to add "the" to their name after a lawsuit from a jazz label, and then they split up. Their third album, Urban Hymns, was going to be the singer's solo debut, but he gathered more and more former bandmates until it was just the Verve again. Anyway, point was, that singer, Richard Ashcroft, had a copy of this, a 1965 LP by the Andrew Oldham Orchestra. Symphonic versions of Rolling Stones songs. Andrew Oldham was the Stones' first manager, and this is his version of Satisfaction. It was Oldham who encouraged Mick Jagger and Keith Richards to write songs, and the first of these they were happy with was heard in the intro to this video. It was called The Last Time, it went to number 1, and the Andrew Oldham Orchestra's version sounded like this. Since he'd first heard it, Ashcroft had felt this track could be turned into something outrageous, and one of the demos he brought to the Verve was him singing to a looped sample of it. Another way people coped with the 90s was by recycling the 60s, and so in that sense, Ashcroft had his finger right on the pulse. Virgin Records wanted it as the lead single, and so they just needed to clear that sample. The Stones label, Decca, granted clearance right away. They released the song, and there were no further problems. Sorry, that's my incorrect statement alarm. Now I think about it, there were problems. It's time to meet the villain of the story. In the 50s, Alan Klein was known as an aggressive negotiator on behalf of recording artists. He'd uncover massive amounts in unpaid royalties and force labels to hand them over. Sadly, he would keep most of that money for himself and also take ownership of artists' recordings without their knowledge. He became the Rolling Stones manager in the mid-60s, netting them a $1.2 million advance from Decca, but also writing fine print that meant he didn't have to give it to them for another 20 years. His company, ABKCO, took ownership of the band's entire 60s catalogue, including The Last Time, and therefore this. Any sample has two copyrights, sound recording and composition. Decca had cleared the sound recording, and as composition owner, Klein had to be approached next. Given his reputation, you have to wonder what Virgin were thinking when they decided to hand him literally all the cards. But before we get into that, last week I discussed songwriting versus arranging, and just to recap, a song is chords, words and melody, and arrangement is decoration, bass lines, guitar parts, string parts. Every note an arranger writes is legally part of that song, meaning Jagger and Richards were credited for all this music on Andrew Oldham's album, despite not writing most of it. Still, at least Oldham got royalties for Bittersweet Symphony. It was him who really created the music the Verve sampled. Right? Wrong. Meet David Whitaker. an arranger whose career stretched from Frank Sinatra to S Club 7. He did arrangements for the Andrew Oldham Orchestra, and it was him who composed the music the Verve sampled. He was paid a flat fee. His composition was credited to Jagger Richards, but the only trace of their work in it is the string bed, which is the last time's vocal melody at half speed. So wait, after all this noise about Ashcroft, Jagger, Richards, Bittersweet Symphony was David Whitaker's work all along? Not quite. Take a listen to his arrangement all the way through and you'll make a curious discovery that the famous string sample isn't in it. Oh, the tune is kind of hinted at in places. But it's basically not there. What the? Huh? It's time to meet Will Malone, the Verve's arranger. Oh yeah, they had one too. And guitarist Nick McCabe said in Bittersweet Symphony the famous sample hardly features at all. The high string line everyone thinks is the sample is Will Malone's score. It's like the more you learn about this song, the less it seems to be the work of anyone you've ever heard of. So let's break down who did what. The main elements of Whitaker's score are the string bed and bass line, then this bell part, and this string part, in which we can also hear the ghost of Brian Jones' guitar line again at half time. Malone took these ideas and fleshed them out. Here's Whitaker's string part again. And here's what Malone added. Play them together. Extend a few of Whitaker's notes and Malone's additions, minimal but transformative, turned a bit of Whitaker embroidery into an undeniable hook, a true collaboration across the decades. And now let's find out what happened when a certain feisty chap got wind of it. Accounts vary as to when Virgin approached Alan Klein. It was either when the single was already pressed or already climbing the charts, but either way, they'd sunk a lot of money and were screwed if he denied clearance. They approached this massive shark, presented him their own arse, dipped in gravy, and somehow hoped for a friendly handshake. Klein said no, and the Verve's manager turned to Jagger and Richards, who bravely declined to get involved. Klein let them sweat for a couple of days, then called and said they could use it if Ashcroft sold his lyric rights and he took full ownership of the song. Feeling the pressure, the Verve took the deal. A few hours later, Klein was heard to boast, "I was very bad today." Ashcroft got $1,000 and the credits were changed to Jagger Richards. But they were finally granted permission to use the vocal melody. Wait a second. Vocal melody? Wasn't all this about a sample? Got another clip for you. 'Cause it's a bittersweet symphony. 'Cause it's a bittersweet symphony that's like told you once and I told you twice. Well, hello. It turns out that despite what we've always been told, most of this trouble wasn't about sample clearance at all. Ashcroft's vocal melody is a lift. Nick McCabe revealed in an interview that the song is credited to Jagger Richards because of the melody line. The sample is by the by. This explains another quote about the Klein story, that he sued the Verve for using more than was agreed. The sample was fine, but no one got permission to use the melody as well. Still didn't entitle him to 100% mind, but there's one final detail that adds a real garnish of irony to this whole thing. The Jagger Richards song in question, whose honour was so rigorously defended by Klein, was itself partly stolen. That was the Staples Singers, a family singing group from Chicago with their 50s arrangement of an old African spiritual, This May Be the Last Time. Keith Richards acknowledged that him and Jagger adapted it, but luckily the song itself goes back into the mists of time. Now those of you who've paid attention throughout these two parts might say, so what, Si? The Staples Singers couldn't exactly sue the Stones for that. You said it yourself. Arrangers don't own their arrangements. And that's true, but with one exception. Traditional songs. For their version of This May Be the Last Time, the arrangement is the Staples Singers' copyright. Jagger and Richards' use of it was an act of plagiarism, and the only reason Bittersweet Symphony didn't one day end up credited to Jagger, Richards, Staples was because the Staples Singers weren't represented by Alan Klein. Released in June 1997, Bittersweet Symphony was one of the last big anthems of Britpop. It charted everywhere, its video becoming a favourite of Aggie twats the world over, and is seen as one of the greatest songs ever. Not by me, I think it's drizzle, but I was ordered to do the song by my sponsor to drive clicks, and I'm nothing if not cooperative. Honest Value Coffee, the acrid stimulant of the working poor. In 1999, Andrew Oldham sued too, and at this point the Verve lost all recording rights. The album sleeve was changed to read, performed by the Andrew Oldham Orchestra. The humiliations kept coming. Alan Klein licensed the song to Nike and every other degrading advert he could find. The song's Grammy nomination went to Jagger Richards, and in 2013 Andrew Oldham released Plays the Rolling Stones Songbook Volume 2, featuring How's that for a low blow? David Whitaker's career got a shot in the arm, but the Verve split in 1999. Alan Klein died in 2009, Nick McCabe sold most of his guitars on Facebook in 2014, and in 2018 Ashcroft went on the telly and dropped a baggie of Definitely Not Cocaine out his trousers, responding with a good old-fashioned damage limitation ballad. Stitched up, matched up, crucified before the world, before you open your eyes. But the next year, Jagger and Richards surprised everyone by signing the publishing and credit for Bittersweet Symphony back to Richard Ashcroft, who called it truly kind and magnanimous, which it kinda was, but they waited long enough, and the song's big paydays were long behind it. You'd better believe the Alan Klein Company held on to their share too, but all the same, Ashcroft's management called it affirmation that Bittersweet Symphony was wholly Richards' creative work. Ashcroft thanked Jagger and Richards for acknowledging me as the writer of a masterpiece. The song's credit now only lists himself, which, as we've seen, in accuracy terms is a roughly 0% improvement on what it used to say. Still, if there's a lesson to be taken from all this, it's that the best response to an injustice is its replacement by an equal and opposite injustice. Right, kids? Thanks for watching. Click here to subscribe, and also please hit the bell or your subscription won't work. Click here for part 1 of this songwriting versus arrangement discussion, and click here for the video the algorithm has determined you most want to watch. Ciao!